But tonight we are thrilled to welcome Jessica Brody, Joanne Rendell, and Marissa Meyer in conversation to celebrate Jessica and Joanne's new book, Sky Without Stars. So, Jessica Brody is the author of several popular novels for teens and tweens, including The Geography of Lost Things, 52 Reasons to Hate My Father, A Week of Mondays, Better You Than Me, and the Unremembered trilogy. She lives with her husband and 4 dogs near Portland, Oregon. Joanne Rendell is the author of 3 novels and holds a PhD in English literature. She teaches fiction writing to teens and kids and is a board member for the Youth Shakespeare Company, New Genesis Productions. With her husband and son, Joanne divides her time between New York City and New Paltz, New York. Marissa Meyer is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Heartless and the Lunar Chronicles. She lives in Tacoma, Washington, with her husband and twin daughters. She's a fan of most things geeky, Sailor Moon, Firefly, any occasion that requires a costume. Excellent. And has been in love with fairy tales since she was a child. She may or may not be a cyborg. Watch carefully.
We're still figuring it out.
So, books are on the tables behind you. You can purchase them at any register. The closest, if you don't want to go downstairs, is in the tech center. The store does close at 7. However, we can go on for the duration of the event, so don't panic. Also, the only thing is that you do have to make your purchases before 7. So, there will be a little alarm, little announcement about 10 minutes before 7. That might be a good time to scuttle off and make purchases if you haven't done so. Finally, if you need parking validated, come see me after the event. I have the magic stamp. But now, please join me in welcoming Jessica Brody, Joanne Rendell, and Marissa Meyer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm super excited and honored that I get to be here with Jessica and Joanne to celebrate Sky Without Stars, which was one of my favorite books that I read last year. It made it in my top 10 list that I do on my blog. And it's absolutely phenomenal, and you guys are going to love it. I can't wait for you to read it. So why don't you guys start by telling us a little about the book?
Ooh, yeah, I have visual aids.
Always appreciate it.
Yes, we're super excited about to launch Sky Without Stars, which you may or may not know is a sci-fi reimagining of both Les Miserables by Victor Hugo and the French Revolution, sort of melded into one sci-fi adventure. But it takes place on the very divided planet of Laterre, which is in a distant solar system called the System Divine. The rich of Laterre live in luxury and prestige, and they live under a bio-controlled dome on this rain-soaked planet where they have perfect weather all the time. While the poor, the 95% of the planet, live in the slums of Laterre, like the underbelly, in the remains of 500-year-old remains of leaky, rusting spaceships. The same spaceships that rescued them, their ancestors, from the first world, which died 500 years ago. Because of this great divide, there's a lot of tension on our planet between these multiple estates. So we have 3 main characters, and the first is Chatine, who is loosely based on Eponine from Les Mis, if anyone's familiar with Les Mis. She is the daughter of con artists. She lives in the slums. She's part of the third estate, and she's a thief. And her one goal in life is to get off this miserable planet. So much so that she's been stealing and conning for years to build up enough money to pay for an illegal passage to another planet. But when the story starts, she learns that it's not going to ever be enough because the price of passage has quadrupled. So she thinks she's lost until she gets an offer from the most powerful man on the planet to spy on his grandson in return for a one-way ticket off the planet.
And that's Marcellus, who, if anybody knows Les Mis, is based on Marius. Does anybody know Les Mis? Well, okay.
Yeah, we should have asked that.
Yeah, okay, so
These are your people.
yeah, it's right.
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
It is people.
So based on Marius, and so Marcellus in our book is, like Jess said, the grandson of like one of the most powerful people on the planet. It also turns out his father was a traitor, and many years ago was locked away on the prison moon. That's sort of the only moon outside Laterre.
And it's called Bastille.
And it's called Bastille, of course. So yeah, his father's been rotting in this prison, but when we first meet Marcellus, Marcellus has learned that his father has died, and he has to go to the morgue to identify his body. But when he gets to the morgue, he finds his father has a message on him, a message that he can't read.
So then enter our third character, Alouette, who is loosely based on Cosette from Les Mis. She lives in a secret underground refuge buried underneath the planet with a sisterhood of very intelligent, mindful women who have been tasked with protecting the last remaining library on the planet. And this is a very important task because on this planet, the written word has completely died out, except for this last remaining library. And that is the reason why Alouette is the only person on the planet who can read the secret message left by Marcellus' father.
And then, of course, there's a moment where there's a shocking murder that actually brings Alouette, after 12 years, to the surface. She comes up from underground. And of course, our three characters will meet, and they'll all play a really vital role in the revolution that's rumbling on the planet. So,
that's it.
I love listening to you guys talk about it because I read it. It's been 4 or 5 months ago now, and it's like bringing back all of these memories. Like, and then, and also. So, I'm really curious. You guys have known each other a long time, right?
10 years now.
10 years.
Yeah.
Who had the idea? Where did the idea come from?
I had the initial idea that really just started as Les Mis in space, which, as all good ideas do. I actually was in a retellings workshop, and I never wanted to write a retelling. I was just very curious about them. I'd read the Lunar Chronicles. I was like, how does someone write a retelling? How would you even do that? And I sat in on a workshop, and in the workshop they had us fill out this worksheet. And then the first column they wrote, they said, brainstorm a bunch of classic tales or myths or stories that you really love. And among many, I wrote Les Mis, because I've always been a fan. And then in the next column, they were like, brainstorm a bunch of different settings or cultures or, places. And I just wrote space. And I drew a line between Les Mis and space, and I got chills. And I was like, oh my God, someone has to write Les Mis in space. It's not me. Because I could never do that. I could never have that undertaking. I just didn't feel confident enough, I think, because I wasn't big on the classics and stuff. But as you heard, Jo has a PhD in literature. And so I came to her.
Well, yeah, we were having dinner, and I remember you said you had this idea, and I was like, you do realize, Les Mis is one of my favorite books ever. I'm probably one of the few people that have read it, and I've read it 3 times. It's 1,300 pages.
Yeah, it's a commitment. It's
No,
3,500
I just love it. I love big books. I love being in the world of these huge stories. I read War and Peace and Anna Karenina. I just love being absorbed for so long. So she heard that, and she was like, wait. I've got this idea, and I just love the idea of co-writing something with someone, because somebody once said to me that fiction writing, like we do, is like getting to play dolls when you're an adult. I don't know if you feel like that, but yeah.
Never made the dolls.
No,
but it is
or role play or something.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. So, and then I thought, what could be better than getting to play dolls with a friend? So I said yes.
Yeah, I was like, do you want to write it with me? And she's like, yes.
Right.
And then we pitched it to my agent, and I started the whole thing. I was like, okay, so it's Les Mis in space, and it's got, but it's told from the teen character's point of view, and he stopped me and goes, you had me at Les Mis in space. And that's sort of how it started.
That's how it, definitely.
Yeah.
So both of you being huge fans of Les Mis, I am also a huge fan of Les Mis. How did you feel there's a lot of extra pressure to get it right, or to write for fans of Les Mis, or?
So it's interesting, I never thought of that until I was starting to promote this book, and I was at a book festival thing, and I was, this is a Les Mis retelling in space, and someone actually wrote, are you terrified? That is one of the greatest works of all time. And I was like, now I am. And I never really thought of that before.
Yeah, and I think we've always tried to call it a reimagining.
Yeah.
So we're sort of we're taking really, a lot of liberties with it, but also trying to be true to it as well. But we're not sticking to the plot exactly. We're borrowing things, and I think it's sort of layered, because I think if you know the musical, there's things in there for you. But if you also know the book, there's definitely
Has anyone here read Les Mis? Yeah.
Am I? Yeah.
Okay.
The only one?
All right. So for those of you like familiar with like the movie musical, you'll find stuff in there. You'll be like, oh, I see what they. Hopefully, you'll be like, I see what they did. If you've read the book, there's like a couple extra ones just for you. If you're like, oh, that's. Yeah. I mean, and one of the reasons we decided to pull in the French Revolution was because we found that like Les Mis has some great character stories, but let's face it, the revolution is a little weak. Like
it's based like after the actual French Revolution. It's like a sort of smaller insurrection that never
and
like
it fails. So we're like, we can't write that into it.
Yeah.
So not that the French
That will
Revolution
not fly away these days.
and then it failed, and everyone went back to their lives. But so we started to pull in. We wanted to like make the bigger stakes in the world. So that's when we started to pull in French Revolution things like we based the world on pre-revolutionary France, where there was 3 estates, and there's a patriarch and a matrone who are sort of based on Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. Obviously, we have Bastille, which I won't tell you, but in the French Revolution, it gets stormed. I'll just tell you that much. And so, yeah, we just started to kind of cherry pick because Les Mis itself is a little bit hard to retell, I think, in a modern setting. So we just picked things that we really liked.
But I think one of the ideas you had in that very start is that there are 3 really great teen characters in Les Mis, and so we tried to really like focus in on. I think was one of your first ideas was like, oh, there's these 3 great characters. What can we do with their stories?
Yeah.
So that's where it like spun off from there. Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I love, because Eponine was always one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, me too.
And her, the love story between her and Marius, it's one of the most, devastatingly sad things in all of literature.
Yeah.
And so I love that you really brought her to the forefront of the story, and we really get to get into her head so much.
Yeah, she
this
is the main character. of
She's
this
definitely
one.
this book. This is her book. Yeah, definitely.
She doesn't get enough screen time, I think.
No, she's kind of forgotten in the
original,
musical.
yeah. No, that's true.
And then also her relationship and the Gavroche character, who is,
Yeah.
I mean, Gavroche is my favorite character from Les Mis, and so I was really happy to see you guys do so much with him, and I can't wait to read book 2, see what you have planned.
See what we planned. Yeah.
So tell me about the co-writing process. I will just say I've been asked many, many times, like, would I ever like to co-write something, and who would you want to co-write a book with, and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like I am such, like, a neurotic, like, perfectionist isn't the right word. Like, I'm a control freak. I like to have control over everything, and I feel like co-writing would be so difficult because what if I don't agree? Like, what if I feel strongly about doing this and my co-writer wants to do this? And so how did you guys make it work?
Well, I have to say, like, just to preface it, I'm a total control freak too. So it was like having written 15 books on my own. I didn't plan that. I just
She likes to sing. It's part of the process.
It's part of the
We're going to have a Les Mis karaoke.
Join us out for some karaoke. So like I felt like I went into this as a different thing. Like I think when you co-write, you kind of have to go into it as like, this is not my book. This is our book. And so, one of the rules we made up really early was that if one person doesn't like something, then you don't argue for it, you have to find something we both like. Because if you just start arguing back and forth, you're never going to convince the other person that it's good. So we would like, if someone's like, I'm not really like digging this plot point, or I'm not really digging this sentence or whatever, you can't be like, no, that's a really good sentence. You just don't know what a good sentence is. You can't do that. You have to be like, okay, let's come up with a better sentence.
Yeah, and I think it's about like being careful of who you collaborate with. I think we were lucky that we found someone that could, you say you're a perfectionist and stuff, but you're also good at letting stuff go. And
That's good to hear.
Yeah, well, and you've been through the editing of 15 books, so you're used to like redrafting and like being okay with people giving you feedback and all this kind of stuff. And I think you have to work with someone who's prepared to like compromise. It's like a marriage, basically.
Yeah, we're basically married.
Yeah, we're basically
But
married.
I think what's interesting is like, I think that it's a better book because of being able to like let go and like have someone else in there kind of going, oh, maybe not this, and just because I think when I write a book by myself, it's not like I phone things in, but there's certain things you're like, well, that's not really working, but that's fine, I'll just figure it out later, and then you don't end up like figuring it out. But when you have someone who's coming in behind you and reading everything, you can't phone it in. You're like, oh God, she's gonna point that out, I'm gonna fix it. And then even stuff that I don't notice, she like comes in, she's like, well, I don't and I'm like, yeah, she's right. We need to fix
We
that.
need to fix it.
Yeah.
I think it's also realizing that it isn't just like dividing it down the middle. You know, we didn't both write like so many thousand words. It's like we really play to our strengths, and so like Jess is the queen of plot. She's got a whole book about how to write plot. You should check that out. She's like the queen of characters and dialogue. I have a few little skills, but like it's,
You have a
know,
lot of skills.
and I like to kind of, we call it illustrate the book. I like doing the descriptions and the kind of worldly stuff and the kind of the chronicles and the kind of all that kind of thing. So I think we play to our strengths, and that helps too, having someone that's also different. So
Yeah, who has different strengths than you.
yeah, exactly.
How was it writing the 3 different characters? Like, did one of you take a character? Or...
Yeah, for this book we did. The second book turned out to be
More.
slightly different. We just
Yeah.
finished the second book that comes out next year. But for this book, like, I took Chatine's characters, her first draft. I wrote almost all of her first draft. But then, and she would write Alouette's first draft. And then we would swap and like edit each other. And then Marcellus, we would just fight over.
Yeah, we're fine. Who gets to write Marcellus?
Was he more fun than writing?
I think it was just because he was the cute boy in the uniform. We were like,
And we were also like tussling over which character he was going to like. So, you know, if you got to control his character. So, yeah, we liked it, you know, so we had to like fight over it. But it was fun because at the end you sort of see how your words just mix. And you said this recently, didn't you? You said about like when we've seen, you know, little quotes pulled from our book recently, you're like, you know, did I write that? Did she write
Yeah, you
that?
start to forget. They blend,
Yeah.
they blend together.
Right, which is kind of satisfying. It's like,
Yeah.
to see how it's become this mix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's been really fun. Like,
Yeah.
my husband always, like, he has to close my door when I'm on Skype with her because I'm just laughing so hard. Like, we have a blast together.
Yeah,
It's been
really,
really
it's cool.
Did you ever develop any like pet peeves toward each other, like?
Oh, good question. I don't know. This is going to be the end of our relationship.
Yeah,
The tour is over.
Book 3 will never be written.
No,
I know.
I don't think so.
I mean, one thing that's frustrating is that Jo has like a really busy life.
Yeah,
so
that's
like she
true.
can only like talk at like certain moments of the day. And so I'll wake up with an idea and be like, this is amazing, I have to tell Jo. And she's like, I can't talk till 3. I'm like, but it's 9 a.m. I just sit on this for 7 hours. Like,
No,
that can
yeah,
get frustrating. But
Yeah.
and then we're on different time zones.
Yeah, that's hard.
So if you wake up with an idea, it's still like 4 a.m. for me. So
No, it's
thank
great.
God she doesn't call me at 4 a.m.
No.
That would be a pet peeve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose with you, like last year when we were like basically writing this book, Jess had how many other books came out? 4.
Yeah, it's, well, 3 books.
3 other books.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't want to just focus on our book?
I was a bit busy.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of Jessica and all of her many, many, many
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
So when I am like under deadline or like looking at my calendar for the next year and what books and what do I have to write, and I start to feel really overwhelmed and like, how am I going to get all of this done? I think about Jessica Brody. It's like, well, she wrote 4 books in a year, so if she can do it, what am I complaining about? And you truly are like one of the most prolific writers that I've ever known. So your secrets, how do you do it?
Secrets. Gosh. I think just, well, first of all, you guys both have kids. I don't have kids.
You have dogs.
I do have dogs.
It's hopeless.
No, that's not what I meant. I was like guiding into like, writing is sort of all I do, and like, you know, it's sort of sad. I kind of don't have a life outside. But no, I just prioritize it like every single day, and that doesn't mean like ignoring my, you know, everyone else in my life, but it's more about like I don't check email before I write, I don't check social media, I don't turn on television, I try not to like have any outside stimulus come in before I write, and that just allows me to write for 3 hours and get like a ton done. And then yeah, I think that's honestly my secret, is just eliminating distraction.
I hate that answer.
We all know that's the right answer.
Because like I read a lot of like personal development books about like productivity and you know how to be most effective at your work and blah blah blah. And that's one of the number one things that people say is like don't check your email first thing in the morning. Whatever, sit down and get work done before you do anything else. And I like can't train
It's
my
hard.
brain to do that.
It was really hard for me when I started because I read a productivity book, and that's where I got it from, and I was like, oh yeah, I can totally do that, and it's really hard, especially when you're just trained to do it. So here's my little secret,
Okay.
my little tip. It's
knew
like,
you had a secret.
I have a tip. The way I would train myself is every morning that I would wake up and I'd want to do something else besides write, like check email, check Facebook, whatever. I would ask myself, Jessica, are you a professional writer or a professional emailer?
Ooh.
Are you a professional writer or a professional Facebooker? Because whatever you do first, you're sort of telling the universe is most important to you. And then I sort of look at email and social media, I sort of feel like that's the entire world demanding things of you. Like every email you get is like somebody trying to demand a piece of your attention, right? So you have to like value and prioritize what's important to you, not what's important to everyone else first. So that's what I would just ask myself every morning, and I'm a professional writer.
I'm doing it. Well, and I also think that giving away a little secret, like she does fall off the horse sometimes.
I do.
Yeah, she definitely falls off the horse. But I'm
not perfect.
The truth comes out. Like she's like, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have checked email. But
my whole day's off.
But I think like it's a bit like, I don't know if anybody's ever meditated when your mind wanders and you're supposed to call it back. I think the thing that you're really good at is catching that and then pulling it back and saying, okay, now I have to come back to it, where it would be really easy to like fall off the horse and then just stay there. I think you're really good at like going, oh, got to get back to it, and then you do.
And on those days when you do like totally mess up and check your email, do you feel like there's a difference in the day?
I notice it like instantly.
Yeah.
I'll go to. I just have less motivation to write after that. Like it gets to the point when you write or whatever your passion is, I just say like prioritize your passion. Do it first. Like tell the universe that's what you're prioritizing today. But I find that like doing that every day, you get really excited to wake up and do it. Because it gets easier. Like 2 weeks and you're in it. And then, and it helps to put your phone in another room, by the way. Like I don't sleep near my phone, it's in the whole other room. But I would find that the days I would check email, I was just like, I'm just gonna do it today. I'm fine, I'm a professional, I've got this. I'm just gonna check really quick. And then I wouldn't want to write after that. So I would notice it. And I think when you get into that habit, sorry, I'm just gonna keep blabbing, I'll be finished.
No, I love this.
But when you get into the
giving us a
habit,
pep talk.
I do the same thing.
No, I do as well.
When you get into the habit of writing every single day, then when you do change it, it's so obvious in your mental state because you just get used to it. Sort of like when you don't, like if you cut out, like sugar or alcohol, and suddenly you have a glass of wine, you're like, woo! Like you feel it more than if you would drink every day. So I think you just notice it so much, and it's so exaggerated that you're like, oh God, I don't want to do that again. That was horrible. So,
okay, that was really good advice. You inspired me. I just want to be more like you, Jessica.
you write a lot of year. Like, what's your?
I usually don't start writing until afternoon because I spend my mornings, going to the gym, and then I come home and do my social media and my emails and like whatever promo tasks I have to do that day. And then I usually do like a 15-minute meditation to kind of divide the day into two parts, and then I start writing. But I like the way that you talk about that. It's like this is the important thing, this is the priority, and this is the passion. And it makes a lot of sense that you would put that first.
I just like checking the box. Like when you've written first thing, you feel like the whole rest of the day is like yours to do whatever you want. You're like, I did it. I checked the writing box, now I can do whatever the hell I want.
I feel like if I did that, then I would never answer emails. Like, I'm done working today.
I will say I'm good at writing. I'm not very good at responding to emails. So
that like falls down.
Yeah, something's got to give, right?
Something's got to give. So a question for you, Joanne.
Yes.
So you have written 3 books before this, all women's fiction, correct?
Yeah.
How was it switching into YA?
So I had a kind of gap of a few years between going from the women's fiction to the YA because I was bringing up my son and doing all that stuff. I think it was just really liberating, actually. I mean, I really enjoyed writing for the women's fiction audience, but I just found there was so much more scope for imagination, and then getting to retell one of my favorite books ever. It just felt like freeing. I loved it. It's also been just a huge learning curve. Like, I have a teen son, but she knows way more about writing about teens than I'll ever know, just put it through all the writing she's done. So that's been a huge learning curve too, learning about the genre. I mean, I'd already been reading YA books, like your books, and, a bunch of books already, because my son was reading that stuff. So, it was fun to like, I just like learning, I think, and I think it was just fun to like learn a new genre and learn from Jess and just try and like use my skills in this different way. Yeah. But then the biggest challenge for me has been like learning about Instagram and like how you go go out there and like tell people about your book. And
Yeah, every time she posts something on Instagram, I'm like, did your son do that? She's like, yes!
Like I learned how to boomerang.
Yes, you learned how to, she's been good.
I still don't know how to boomerang.
So ahead of you.
But her son's been so great with this book because he's like a super like sci-fi, fan, and so
Star Wars.
yeah. So we'll run things past him, and he'll just sort of be like, "Yay, lame!" Like I remember we have like on our planet we have the police force is droids, so it's a police force of droids. And so when we first described the droids, he read it and was like, these sound like garbage trucks. It's like you need to make them scarier. And so we're like, okay. And then he would like he pins things for us, like on Pinterest. He'll be like, this is kind of what you need to go with. And he like designed, I think he designed our motos.
Yeah,
right?
he did.
We had this like flying, kind of like hovering motorcycle things, which we called motos because the French call motorcycles motos. And like he picked out all the cool things, and we're like, yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, no.
He's
So
been really
any
great.
lameness is gone because he's like a high bar to please. So
He's
yeah.
our focus group for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
I can't wait till I have teenagers.
So useful. It was super useful.
It was useful.
And you would read chapters to him aloud and see where he would start to like drift off.
Yeah.
Like she would come back, she'd be like, okay, he loved this, but I could tell his attention was sort of wandering at this bit. And we're like, okay, gotta speed that bit up or add some sort of tension there or something.
Yeah. Just totally exploit him. Yeah.
This is why you have children.
That's why I give him both. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, so.
Do your kids are too young to read your books? Like, when do you think you'll let them read them?
I mean, whenever they start expressing interest, they can. Because my books are all pretty clean. I have 4-year-old twins. So I don't know. Whenever
Do
they
they
want to.
understand
But I also
that-
I don't plan on forcing my. If they don't want to read my books, they don't have to.
Yeah.
But
Do they understand that mommy's a writer? Like, do they get what that means?
I don't know how much they understand. They can pick out my books on a bookshelf. They know which ones are mommy's. But I don't know if they like understand that as I wrote these books or as like these books belong to mommy. You know? So but they seem, and they'll sit at my laptop and type away and don't bother me, I'm working.
That's adorable.
Yeah, and they've come to a lot of book signings with me. So now whenever we're going to a bookstore, are we meeting mommy's friends there? Because I think all of the people in the audience are my friends. And, we're gonna go see your friends.
That's adorable.
So yeah. But how much do they really comprehend? Who knows?
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah. At least so they're too young for Harry Potter. Definitely.
They are. I mean, they've seen the first couple movies and are
Okay.
super into it. And they pretend they have little wands and they pretend to cast spells. And I can't wait till we get to Harry Potter. It's like my biggest mom dream is to read Harry Potter and then take them to Universal Studios. And I cannot wait. Yeah.
This is why you need to be born into a writer's family. Like so lucky.
Yeah. All the book love.
Yeah.
So tell us. You mentioned that you just finished the second book.
Oh yeah.
Can you tell us anything about it? And it's going to be 3.
There's gonna be 3.
It's a trilogy.
It's a trilogy. It was really freaking hard.
It was
as second books are. in
Sophomore
series.
slump.
It is. It was second book curse, I call it, but it's we just got the revision letter. We're kind of convinced that editors like want to torture you purposely. So our editor sent us the revision notes, which is an 11-page letter of just single-spaced. The day, like 2 days before we left for tour. And she's like, well, since you guys will be together, I figured like you can work on the book. And I was like, yeah, on like the 5 a.m. flights, and like in between school visits, like.
Yeah.
But actually we did work on it today.
Yeah, no, we did work on it. But yeah, we're really pleased of how it's shaping up. It's like feeling pretty epic and a good follow-up to this one. But it's challenging with a trilogy. I mean, you know this more than anyone, but like having to like continue the story that you've already set up, but then set up for the next book, which you haven't written yet, and so you're juggling all these plot lines, especially with 3 characters and the interweaving and the bigger political scene.
Yeah. And inevitably there's something that you regret that you said in the
Oh,
first
right.
book. Like,
Oh,
can we go back and reprint and change that thing?
Just today we said
Just
that. We're
today.
like, we'll just go back to the first book and like print this in, and we'll just draw it into everyone's book, and nobody will notice.
A pretty kind of like, I'm sure with you, like a pretty clear idea of what the trajectory of the book is, but at the same time, so many details change, and then you're like, oh god.
Yeah. How are we gonna work around
How am I
that?
going to get to there? Yeah. So
We can't really say much about it, I guess, because of the spoilers. But
Yeah.
it's called Between Burning Worlds, so as you can probably tell, it's going to be fiery, fiery and explosive. There's
Fiery and epic.
yeah, a lot more. The death toll goes up in the
Yeah.
second book.
and we actually just got a sneak peek of the new cover, and
Oh.
because we love our cover.
Yeah.
And
It's really
cool.
It's really
Yeah,
cool.
it's really, they did a really great job with this one.
It's like my favorite moment in the life of a writer is
Oh.
when you get to see your cover
It's
art.
kind of like
It's magical every time.
And I think it's frightening. Like the
Yeah.
moment right before you open it, because you're like, what if it's bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, I mean,
Have you ever had a book cover that you were
Oh,
like,
yeah.
no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's all I'll say. After 16 books, you get some doozies.
Yeah, I going when I was like a newbie writer, I had no idea that like the author gets really not much say.
Yeah.
I mean, you get more say as you go along. I'm sure you get some say.
Mhm.
We got a little bit.
By
say.
now, I didn't at
Yeah,
first.
at
but
first, but
yeah.
you get no say at first. So they just send you the cover, and you just say, oh, thanks. so it's very hit and miss.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're lucky, you get a cool one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hired like an amazing designer. He did the King of Scars cover. and he did
it totally has a King of Scars.
yeah,
vibe
he did
to
the
it.
Ash
I can see
Princess
that.
covers. Like he's
Yeah.
just
Everless.
everless.
Yes.
Yeah, Everlost. I don't remember. But he has sort of a style. His name's Bill Ellis. He's British, and he's sort of a style about like you'll start to see his. Now we like recognize. We're like that
Yeah,
has to
has to
be
be his cover.
Bill, and
Yeah.
then the maps inside. But
Oh yeah, there's maps.
there's really cool maps, and they hired this amazing Italian map designer. So the book has black and white versions
Yeah.
of so that's Laterre, and then this is the frets, which are the remains of the spaceships where the poor live. But then all of you guys today, you guys get the beautiful colored
How
version.
cool.
Yes. So we had this color version commissioned just for the people who came to our events and who pre-ordered. So thank you guys for
And
coming.
of course, we should talk about the secret.
Oh yes, this is really cool. We actually just found out about this a couple months ago that the first printing only has 2 different covers underneath. So there's this one, and then there's one. I'm sure they'll be in the stack. Does anyone have the crown? There it is. There's a crown. So if you want one or the other, there's a stack there for you to sort through, and you can find.
Did you say I did?
Oh, you did?
Did you?
wanted
Yeah.
the-
Like some people are like really like I want the crown. So the crown is supposed to represent the regime or like the sort of the royalty, and this is the lock on for the refuge who protects the library. So there's sort of 2 different factions of the library.
Yeah, we thought that was so cool.
We were so excited.
Yeah,
when they
so
told us that.
clever.
Yeah, they're
so-
just random.
But it's only on the first printing, so get yours.
Yeah, get it early.
So what will be on all the following?
Just black, I think. There won't be as I don't think they'll be. Yeah, we're.
Clever publisher.
I know. Secret covers. We like secret covers.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
So we are going to have time for some Q&A from the audience, so start thinking about questions you might want to ask. But before we get there, I thought we would do a quick lightning round.
Oh, I love lightning rounds. I know. Do you know what a lightning round is? Okay. You want to explain it?
I'm just going to give you a question, and you're going to say like the first thing that pops into your head.
Oh, okay. It's like Freudian.
Totally Freudian.
Her husband's a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's like I'm on the couch.
I'm going to be judging you.
I'm gonna diagnose you afterwards.
So you're going to answer and then I'm going to answer? Like, or are you doing one at a time? Or are we each
Or
answering
just
each one?
we-
Oh, well, you can both answer.
Okay.
So, yeah.
She's always quicker than me.
I'll go first. if you
Okay,
want.
Jessica, you can go first. Favorite musical?
Les Mis! That was easy.
Oh, I'm gonna do the same one.
Yeah.
Okay. Les Mis.
Les Mis. Oh, okay.
I expected one of you to be. And Wicked, personally.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Yeah.
Favorite song for Les Mis?
On my own.
Mine too.
Empty chairs.
Oh, empty chairs and empty tables.
Sad. Favorite character from the original Les Mis?
Ebony.
That's Laterre.
We're all gonna like answer the same
Probably
one.
Javert because he's so interesting.
Ooh, he's
Yeah,
interesting.
he's very interesting.
Yeah.
By the way, we took
Villains.
Inspector Javert and we turned him into a cyborg.
Yeah.
So he's like,
It's one of the coolest
thank you.
adaptations.
We're very excited about
Well,
that.
he's so dogged in the
Yeah.
first one. That was one of our very first ideas.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's like
he's got
programmed.
And it's
cyborg.
brilliant. It's
Yeah.
brilliant the way that you guys did
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Because he is almost cyborg-like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Programmed to
Yeah.
seek the truth and like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like the book coalesced around that. That was
It
one of our
kinda
first
did,
ideas.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Plus, I just have a thing for cyborgs.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously. We
But
do.
you have good cyborgs in your book. We have
Yeah.
sort of evil cyborgs.
I know,
Yeah.
I know.
We
But
kinda
your
like-
cyborgs like would make sense why everybody would hate cyborgs.
Yeah.
We have like a different
like,
twist on it.
Yeah.
Favorite French food?
Baguettes.
Pain au chocolat.
It's always bread.
Yeah, it's always bread.
It's like my favorite thing
cheese.
about the French is how obsessed they are with bread. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, we had a good one today.
We did have French bread today, just in celebration of our French
Yeah.
inspired book.
Pike place. Yeah.
Let's see, your all-time favorite book.
Oh god, I'm supposed to do lightning, aren't I?
Les
That's cheating!
And actually, it's probably Anna Karenina.
I've never read on
Oh,
Karenina.
it's so good.
Room by Emma Donoghue.
Oh.
I don't know if it's all, it's one of them. It's up there.
You know, I haven't read Room. I've heard it's amazing. The idea of it terrifies me. I'm worried that it'll give me nightmares.
I read
I've
it.
heard that parents have a harder time reading it than non-parents, just
Yeah.
because of its nature. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I mean, it's terrifying, but I don't have a kid, so I feel like it might be easier to like sleep at night
Right.
afterwards. So.
Right. Makes sense. Harry Potter house.
Ravenclaw.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Ravenclaw Prime. Hardback, paperback, ebook, or audio.
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 Really? Both of you?
Yeah,
We're obsessed with audiobooks, and we share them. Like, you know, like we'll be like, you have to listen to this, and
Yeah, no, we're obsessed. with
I was
it.
actually like a really slow reader growing up, and because of that, I didn't like to read because I felt like I was bad at it, and so I like for many years I shut down and didn't read. And then when I discovered audiobooks, I was like, oh, I could have someone read it to me, and it's just changed my life. And I've caught up on so many books I've missed out on just because
And
of
it's
audio.
so great for driving, and when I'm in the city, I walk around everywhere in the city, in New York City, just listening to my audiobooks. I did the audiobooks.
Oh, we were gonna say we did all of your
Yeah.
books on
I'm
audio.
a narrator for the
They're
Potter
so
shows. It's
amazing.
spectacular. So
Yeah.
But that does determine, like, if you have a crap narrator, it can really ruin the book.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I do feel like I get so many more books read because of audio.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, and I listen to audiobooks at double speed.
Because her brain works at double speed.
People think it's really weird, but
Yeah,
so like a 12-hour audiobook I can finish in 6 hours. Yeah, Joe's listened to one of it. She's like, oh my god, my head's gonna explode, but
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
get used to it.
Okay, last question. What are you reading or listening to right now?
Oh, I'm listening to Thunderhead, the sequel to Scythe by Neil Shusterman. It's amazing.
I'm listening to Girls with Sticks, Suzanne Young.
Sharp Sticks.
Sharp Sticks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Suzanne Young's new book.
Yeah. It's really good. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I recommended it.
I know you read it.
I read it first, yeah. But we do that. She's like, you have to listen to this, you have to listen to that. Yeah.
All right. Anything else you guys want to cover before we open it up?
Well,
I think that's probably it.
yeah, it's
And
good.
just that
I mean, I'm
Marissa, we're
curious-
such big fangirls of Marissa. And you should read all her books if you haven't, because they were so inspiring for us.
They're all here, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I am still -2. I have not read Arch Enemies or Heartless yet.
No.
Those are my.
You haven't read Heartless?
No, it's like I want to finish Arch Enemies and then I'm going to go back to Heartless. But
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
hope you'll enjoy it.
yeah, I'm sure I will. Those are my only two. I haven't read.
We're always so in awe of her because when we work together, we can bounce off each other, and like, you know, when we get stuck on plot points or world building things, and we're like, how does she do this on her own?
We're going to embarrass ourselves, but we have a phrase and it's WWMD. Like when we get
You
stuck,
get
we're
rubber
like,
bracelets.
we're like, what would
Yeah,
Marissa do?
yeah.
She would do something awesome, so
Yeah.
let's figure it out. What's awesome?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, I'm
She's
so
a-
honored.
She's our like sci-fi retelling idol.
Yeah, no, she is. I was like, what? We're gonna get to her in a bookstore.
Yeah.
For the launch party, yay.
Yay.
All right, so we're gonna open up to Q&A. This store is, like she said, closing here in about 15 minutes, so if you need to go buy books, this is probably gonna be a good opportunity to do so. But otherwise, does anyone have any questions?
Lightning questions.
Yeah. Those are
Lightning
fun,
or
right?
otherwise.
What's on the dog tag?
Oh, we forgot to tell you about the dog tags. So, you want to tell them?
Well, so the refuge where the character Alouette lives, with the sisterhood, each of the sisters wears a set of beads with their name, and Alouette's sort of name is Little Lark.
Her nickname.
Her nickname is Little Lark, so all the dog tags say Little Lark.
So in the original Les Mis book, Alouette Cosette is called the Lark. Like they call it, like, I don't know why they call
I
it.
don't know.
You remember? Yeah.
I think that she sings.
Oh, 'cause she
in the
sings,
morning.
yeah. So we nicknamed her Little Lark, and
And Alouette in French means little lark.
yeah, that's right. So we made dog tags like Alouettes because we're nerds,
And we wear them.
and we
All the
wear them
time.
all the time. Yeah, because we're nerds. This is our cosplay, you guys. Look. As deep as it gets. Although you're looking very Chatine in your
Yeah, no,
boots.
it's true. I don't think she would wear sparkly.
She would not wear sparkly boots.
No.
She would wear the all black.
She would. That's true. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm just curious, what is it like going from like, because you both write contemporary,
Yeah.
what is it like jumping from contemporary to like sci-fi or like where you have to like build your own world? Like
Yeah.
you can't use one that's already there.
That's good. That's a really good
It's
question,
really good,
yeah.
and it's really hard. I think
Yeah.
like for both of us, it would be
It
struggling.
was a new challenge. It was like fun to really like.
Yeah.
And then I think both of us are like students, so we're like, how do other people do this?
Yeah.
And like looking at people like Marissa and like just sort of seeing how like rich they make the world and knowing that it's going to take time to like do that.
And one thing we did rely on which was great, was because we based it on pre-revolutionary France, we were able to kind of take things and then twist them. So instead of just being like, okay, let's just like pull stuff out of out of the top of our head, we actually would like we would study French Revolution, we'd study Les Mis, and then we'd figure out how we could twist it. Like with the first, second, and third estate, we decided that like the first estate in pre-revolutionary France, they lived in Versailles pretty much. They lived like, away from the city, away from sort of the slums. And so we took that to another level, and we have them in this biocontrolled dome that's like literally on a hill that you cannot get into unless you are in that estate. So we just tried to like take things that we loved but like interested about, and turn it kind of on its head, or turn it sci-fi. And like Bastille, we decided, it would be cool if Bastille, the prison, was on the moon. And then from there, we're like, why is it on the moon? Oh, because there's a certain mineral on that moon that they need mined, and it's a very tough mineral to mine, so of course let's send the prisoners up there to mine it. So it's like things like that where I think that's how we kind of
Yeah, and the
shaped it.
refuge actually came from the book, because in Les Mis there's no convent or refuge, but in the book Cosette and Jean Valjean hide in a convent for years, and that's what gave us this idea of this secret sort of underground library place. So.
In the original Les Mis, Cosette grows up in a convent, and so we tried to kind of twist the idea of a convent. We have this like kind of sisterhood of women who are protecting, instead of like the word of God, it's just the written word. So we're trying to kind of twist things like that. And,
Yeah.
but it was so fun. Like we said, it's like playing dolls. We're like, the dollhouse is this whole other planet. We got to be like, and then this person can do this and fall in love with them, but then he's in love with her, and like, yeah.
Will there be more, sorry, I was going to ask, will there be more, and I can't remember what you guys named him, but Jean Valjean's character, he's obviously the main character of Les Mis.
Yes.
What do you just tell me what you planned for him?
I know, we can't really
spoil
But
it.
is he a bigger presence in the second book, or?
He will be in the third book, I think. Yeah, less so in the second book.
Yeah.
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 That's what I can
I was
say.
saying.
Okay, I'll accept that,
That's
yeah.
one more question. Yeah.
So you guys have all written retells.
Yes.
How do you kind of find the line between creating your own story based on the original and not like completely copying the original, but also not taking only one element from the original
Yeah.
and completely destroying it?
I would like to hear Marissa's answer on this. We're like taking notes.
So for me, what I would do was, once I knew what story I was going to be retelling, I would make a list of what to me are the most iconic elements. For Cinderella, I knew there was going to be a shoe. I knew there was going to be a ball and a prince, and she would have the wicked stepmother, those stepsisters. So I figured out what are the things that to me make it a Cinderella story. And those things were then non-negotiable to me. But then from there, I felt like any direction I wanted to take it, or any way that I wanted to take those things and twist those things to fit the new world or the new genre, I would be free to do that.
Yeah, I think
It's sort of
similar.
similar,
We sort of like, obviously Les Mis doesn't have like the element elements of Cinderella that are sort of recognizable, but there were certain things recognizable, like the fact that Inspector Javert is chasing down Jean Valjean, and we kept that storyline alive. But then, because Jean Valjean's not our main character, we also have him chasing down Chatine because she's a criminal.
Yeah.
And like things like the convent
And stuff, yeah.
and there's like a famous scene in the musical and in the book where Jean Valjean lifts a very heavy, I think it's a cart. Yeah, a very heavy cart, and that kind of gives him away to Javert. So we actually imitated that, but with a giant statue that he sort of like gives his identity away. So we.
And I don't know if you found this, but I found that at least the stories we've all picked, I think if you were just to retell them straight in this world now, there would be problem, quite a big problem or two with them, because like, say Cosette in Les Mis, she's very much like a wallflower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's
not very interesting.
She's just the kind of loving, it's pretty, and so we were like, we can't have Cosette, have that kind of character. We need to make her a little more kick-ass, and we've got to make her, and then so that's why we have the idea of her being the guardian of the book. So I think that also gives you that, if it's a retelling of something older or something different, you kind of have to take it a different direction in this world.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think just like finding those elements that you love about the story you're retelling and just finding cool ways to twist them.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite things about reading Marissa's series was just like seeing what she did with it. Like, in Winter with the, I don't know if anybody's read Winter, but like I loved the way you did the like glass box that like Snow White ends up in. So just like finding cool ways to twist things that you love, because other people who love that story are gonna like think that's cool too.
Yeah, Snow White would be such a like kind of a passive character if you like took
sure.
her straight
and
up.
fairy tales in general. I mean, a lot of the female characters from the older versions, they're pretty.
Yeah. And it's all about who's the fairest on the wall.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
not-
And also the romances and fairy tales are, you meet, you fall in love, happily ever after, you get married. Like, there's very little development. It's all about, getting married and moving upward in life, more about like developing the actual relationship. So.
One thing we did do, which was I thought kind of cool, was like in order to make it more, I guess, teen appropriate, is there's a lot of stories that revolve around prostitution in Les Mis, and we didn't really want to go there. And so instead we made the prostitution ring, we call them blood bordels, and it's where the young sell their blood, or they sell the nutrients from their blood, which makes these like rejuvenation formulas for the rich, because like you can pull certain nutrients out of your blood and they can like be turned into like face creams and stuff, which is kind of gross. But so we created like this ring of like blood bordels instead of regular bordels, just because we wanted to like keep that alive of like how the poor end up in these horrible situations where they're having to sell their body, but we tried to take it like in a different, they're selling a different part of their body.
Yeah.
So.
I thought that was genius.
Oh, thank you.
I absolutely loved it. When I got to that part, I thought it was so clever, because it's still selling your body.
Yeah.
And
keeps it.
Yeah, so it's thematically very on point.
It's just for girls.
Yeah.
It was girls.
We
It's
did
so
make it,
creepy.
it is creepy.
Yeah.
And we did make it like where it's the girls have better nutrients in their blood, so it's still like a thing that young girls fall into, and that they get sort of hooked on it because they're making a lot more money than they would in a regular job. So, but that was another thing we just had to twist just to make it more appropriate for the
Yeah.
Any other questions? These are great questions. No? Anybody? We have a question from Marissa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wanted to know, like, speaking of retellings, like, what was the process of going on something that's based on another story and then having to basically create your everything from scratch? Like
with the new
Renegades.
Like,
movie series.
Oh god, it was so much harder. Yeah, because with the retelling, you have something to base it on. It's like I think of the fairy tales as kind of like this skeleton framework that I can then pile all this stuff on. But I already have the beginning of the story and the middle of the story and the end of the story, and it's kind of plotted out for me. But with switching then to something new, like with Renegades, go anywhere. You can do anything. The world is full of possibilities. And at first I thought that was going to be really great and fun and freeing. But then it was so hard making decisions.
Yeah.
It was so hard figuring out what is the actual part of the story? What is the story that I'm trying to tell?
Right.
We had that. We would have that problem too, where if we would get like, oh, too many choices, then we would just go back to the source material and try to find something that could guide us, and that always helped. So I can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question, just to kind of like tie it all together, which is, okay, so Marissa now can go in a time machine and visit like Cinder Marissa. Like Marissa, who is promoting Cinder.
Okay.
Like, what lessons would you teach Marissa? And we're just going to take notes for a friend.
Not for us.
Like launching a
so
series.
like go back to like when Cinder was first coming out.
What do you
When
think
you're
you'd
trying
like
to launch
learn?
a series, you know.
What did I tell that, Marissa? I would tell her to make sure to keep things in perspective. And I mean, it was such a huge life change for me, going, because I'd been a freelance proofreader. I wouldn't say I was struggling, but it was, I was sort of living paycheck to paycheck in a way. And then all of a sudden I had this book, and it's a #1 New York, or Cinder was never #1, but it's a New York Times bestseller, and all of a sudden I'm getting invited to all these things, and Hollywood is calling, and they want to make a movie, and I mean, it was like a complete life change within a fairly short period of time. And so I would tell her to keep in perspective that, like, you're not here for the money or the fame or the success. You're here because you love to write and you love storytelling. And that is always the most important thing. It's always going to be the most important thing. So to stay focused on that.
That is a good lesson.
Right. Yeah, because it's like you're going to buffeted wherever you are in the process. So keeping that as your like anchor.
Yeah. What about you? Like, not even like your first book release, but like if you could go back to your like teen selves, what would you, or your aspiring writer selves, what would you say?
I didn't really want to be a writer as a teen. I wanted to be a businesswoman. And I did become a businesswoman, and then I quit to become a writer. But
writing is also a business.
Yeah,
you kind of
absolutely.
get the most of both worlds.
Yeah,
Best of both worlds.
Yeah, I'd probably say to myself, you'll come back to it, because I loved writing when I was a kid, and we've been finding all these stories we both wrote when we were kids, and they're remarkably similar. It's really funny.
Yeah.
But then I sort of like got diverted into thinking, I can only really look at other people's work. That's when I went and did my PhD in literature, and I was like, no, I can only do that. You can't make a proper living being a writer. But I think there was a yearning in me to like get back to it was always the writing part of even being an academic that I loved. So it was like, I probably would tell myself, you'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Or will be.
I think like when I first started to try to write professionally, I think I was like on this, what I thought was this timeline. It was like, I have to get published before I'm 30, and I have to hit the New York Times list by this time, like all of these goals and road marks. And I think I would just tell myself, like, there's no timeline. Like, because
it's the process.
Yeah, it's the process. I didn't sell my first book. Like, I didn't sell the first draft of the first version of my second book, and like it took a lot of time. And I think I just kept thinking, oh, that's not part of the plan.
Yeah, I was the exact same way. I had so many goals and get so frustrated when it didn't happen as fast as I thought it should.
I think that's just good advice for anyone kind of like, there's no timeline. It's just
enjoy the process.
Yeah, it's going to happen when it happens, or it's not, and that's fine too.
And you just, I don't know if any of you are like writers, just keep writing, because it's just literally the process of writing gets you there. And it's the people who stick with it.
Yeah, if you were to see some of our writing as a teen, you'd be like, they got published someday? Like, really?
All my fan fiction is still online. You can see my writing as a teen.
Under your name?
No, I wrote under Alicia Blade.
And she's willing to tell us that.
Fanfiction.net, Sailor Moon, it's out there.
If you're writing fan fiction, we were just writing about boys.
Well, I wrote about the boys in Sailor Moon.
We were writing fan fiction for our own lives. We were like, and then I'll date this boy, and he'll fall in love with me, bring me roses.
I had a friend who was really into the Backstreet Boys, so there was a lot of her and Nick fanfiction.
Oh yeah.
Good times.
Good times.
All right, any more questions before we do some signing?
Do you guys have any recommendations for maybe some really like inspiring stories that are not very popular right now, or like underrepresented or underrated right now that you want to like
books that we...
They could be, I guess they could be movies or TV shows, but like books in general, I guess, that are like not a lot of people are talking about them.
Yeah.
You guys have read them and you're like, more people should read these.
I love that
Gosh,
question because
yeah.
I feel like there's too many books that fall into that category that frankly like frustrates me.
Jess Curry.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Like
Yeah.
Jessica Corey has a new book out called Last of Her Name, and it's like an Anastasia in space sort of retelling, and it's so good. And I read it a long time ago, like when she was first working on it, and I think it's her best book. So, but.
Look at me. I'm going to be boring, but I'm going to say Les Mis. I mean, there are like...
Don't just watch the musical,
No,
read the book.
Because like, okay, there
Get an
are...
abridged version.
There is like 3 chapters on the Paris sewage system, and there's like 3 chapters on like, you know, the battle of, you know,
Waterloo. I think he talks about Waterloo for like
you
200
know,
pages.
you can get through those. But it's just such like an epic, and it is like a melodrama too. So when you're in it, you're so absorbed. So if you ever like find yourself wanting to just be in a world, like I could, and then just skip the bits about the Paris.
Get an abridged. It's like the only book I've ever read where I would recommend an abridged version.
Yeah. There's just he goes on for way too long.
I actually read the sewage system part because I was kind of a nerd, and I actually really enjoyed it because it was really interesting. But I can see like not everybody wants to, so
Yeah,
I would
not
say,
everybody likes that joke.
I just remember, because I read it, I was like a teenager, it was a long time ago, but I remember that it takes like 100 pages just for him to get the point across that the priest is a good man.
Yeah.
It's like we're 100 pages into the book, I've got it, move on with the story.
They had more time in those days.
What about you? Do you have any underrepresented?
So, one of the authors that I love, and actually Lish McBride is here, and she and I are like hugely obsessive about this author, and we're always talking like, why doesn't anybody else read her? Is Rosemary Clement Moore.
So good.
And she's so good. And she has 2 books in particular, Texas Gothic and Spirit and Dust, and they're all the things. They're super sexy romantic, they are hilarious, they are spooky and dramatic and action-paced. I mean, they're everything that I love in a book. So I just wish that everybody would read her, because nobody has ever heard of her.
Are they on the
I never heard of her.
I have no idea if they're on
We should look her
audio.
up on audio.
Yeah, they're really fun books.
That's a really good question.
Yeah. I also love Lish's books as well.
As do I.
Firebug and yes.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was, never mind.
How do you think about including diversity when you write?
The diversity question.
That diversity question.
Yeah, no. It was not a challenge, but it was an interesting question for us because we sort of pictured this world to be kind of post-race, like it's way in the future, and we sort of were like, well, like race isn't really an issue anymore in this world. It's class, and there's different races in all the different classes. It's not what people focused on. So that being said, like we wanted to make sure it was a diverse world within that, but we didn't want to draw attention, like we didn't want it to be the issue of the book because we wanted really to focus on the class issue. So we made diverse characters throughout the book, but don't really like
Signpost it in a kind of our way.
Yeah.
So and then, you know, now in the publishing industry that, you know, you get a lot of reads that will read the book and make sure that they're sensitive to diversity and stuff, so you have to be very aware when you're writing teen books these days, at least. Yeah, we
actually had 2 sensitivity reads on this. Like we had one that came back with flags, and like red flags that we fixed. And we were, you know, and what's so great about the sensitivity reads is they're catching stuff that you don't, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So they were catching things that we were like, oh my God, I never would have thought of that. And so, you know, we made sure they were fixed. And then we got another reader who was different because we wanted to make sure that there wasn't like echoes of the other reader. So we had like a brand new reader and who we did not tell them what any of the other issues were because we wanted to make sure if there were issues they would find them. And that one came back really positive. So,
and we did really want to talk about, keep it focused on class and poverty versus wealth, you know, instead of being focused on sort of more identity politics. We wanted it more about this class politics, you know, because that is such a huge divide in this world still. We wanted to really explore that, like the sort of like, you know, the furthest extent that could go, like kind of, you know, the 5% and the 90, we say 5%, 95 and 1% and 99%. We really wanted to explore that as our kind of, I don't know whether you would call that diversity, but that being the kind of thing we wanted to focus on.
But we were also really careful to make sure that the diverse characters that we put in were not in one group or the other. You know, we wanted to really mix it so that it wasn't like, oh, all people with this skin color happen to be in this state, and we wanted to make sure that didn't happen because, again, we didn't want it to be pointed out as like, this is a book that divides by race, because that's not how we envisioned the world. It's a great question, though.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And we were trying to be very sensitive about it because we know it is a sensitive issue.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things I feel about writing in the genre and the age group that we're writing for now is that there is so much awareness. And it is something that so many people are talking about. And I mean, you're constantly learning things and discovering, you know, what is important to readers, what is important to teenagers, and wanting to be, you know, sensitive and inclusive in ways that I think a lot of people wouldn't have even considered 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and I wonder, I mean, I'm not writing in the adult fiction world anymore, but I wonder if there's the same attention to that in the adult world. I think somehow it's really refreshing in the YA world that it is so clued into it, and especially in the last few years, like really trying to talk about issues of diversity across, you know, sexuality, ability, whatever it is, race. So yeah, it's interesting. Great question.
Yeah.
So I'm noticing a growing debate on world building versus characters. And like some people can read a book that everyone loves, but they hate it because there's bad characters, but it's great world building, and the other people are the opposite. So when you're reading, do you prefer world building versus characters? And when you're writing, which do you focus on?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you want to answer that first?
Well, as a reader, I will be more forgiving of bad world building than I will be of bad characters. If I don't like a character, then there's not a whole lot that author's going to be able to do to get me to want to come along for the story. As a writer, I don't know, I mean, I feel like I'm trying to nail them both. I mean, I want to have great characters and great world building, but I think that my characters still come first.
And I think it's really important to make sure that your characters in your world are like married well. You know, like they blend together.
They fit there.
Yeah,
along that world.
So one sort of informs the other. You know, like when we created Chatine and we put her in like these slums, and we're trying to like, okay, what's like sort of really bad conditions that these people could live in that sort of feels more sci-fi. And that's when we came up with like, what if the ships that brought all these ancestors over, they just basically planted them there and were like, okay, here's your house now. And now 500 years later, these are not very nice houses. And so, but we wanted to try to take like the character of Chatine and make sure that she really fit into that world, and that's why she scales walls, and she's like made the frets her home and has like learned to manipulate them almost.
And at the same time, then that so many elements of that world building really play into her motivations and the choices that she makes.
Yes, then that she always, like I feel like it should always be like hand in hand, and that when you're building your characters, they're being informed by the world and vice versa.
And our editor has a good sort of like phrase. She says, you know, she likes it when the setting becomes a character too. You know, so she was talking about in our book how the frets becomes this kind of character because it's sort of melded with Chatine's character too. But I think that's true. It's got to come alive. It can't just be a list of facts about a place that you've just pulled from nowhere. It's got to kind of have its own life to itself. So,
but I think we started with world, right? Like when we sort of sat down and were like, okay, how do we retell Les Mis? I think we started trying to build the world first and then figure out how the characters fit in it.
But we were lucky because we had characters to sort of go from. So it was like it was together really. And then we had the cyborg idea, and then we had the 3 teens. So it was kind of coming. But yeah, we did spend a lot of time with the world building, right?
And I think because we were like so nervous about like being contemporary authors, we were like, we have to get this right, or like people are going to be like, what are these contemporary authors doing? Trying to world build, right? So we were really like making sure we wanted to make sure that the world was like solid before we moved forward.
Maybe one more question?
What would you suggest we read while we're waiting for the next books in your series?
Reread the first book.
Like this. No.
It'll take you the whole year.
And the sewage chapters.
As we're waiting for the next book. Well, don't read our books after you read Marissa's book, because I don't want you comparing them.
They totally hold up. No, I mean, truly, Lunar Chronicles fans are going to love this book. I love this book, and just the cyborgs and spaceships in this really cool world, but in a familiar story that so many of us already know and love, and yeah, I think it's totally up.
Well, when we first sold the book, they immediately were saying it's Les Mis meets the Lunar Chronicles, and we're like, don't say that, like, but I mean, it was a compliment, but also like kind of terrifying. The two books that we love. I don't know. What would you? I love Jess Corey's book because if you're looking for more like Les Mis, like more space retellings, I would go with Last of Her Name. But I also like to mix up genres. Like I'll read the first in a sci-fi or the first in a fantasy, and then to make sure I'm not comparing the next book I read to that too much. I'll try to switch to like a contemporary. Yeah. But that's just my personal preference. Yeah. Because otherwise I start to go like, well, they didn't do that in that book. Like, yeah. No. Keep it different.
Yeah. I would recommend. I just finished listening to an autobiography of Marie Antoinette, and it was not like I wasn't thinking about this book at all when I started it, but there were so many things that I can see their research here, and talk about the estates and the revolution and everything. So it was fascinating. I felt like it gave me another window into the world that you guys created and the history of our world and how it fits with what you're doing. That's amazing.
Nonfiction, maybe then.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you,
Marissa.
Marissa.
Thank you guys.